In Acumatica 2021 R2, we can now have a business event trigger a task and automatically attach that task to a record in Acumatica. I think it's a really cool feature. I think there's a lot of interesting use cases for it, and I would even describe this as like a light workflow. Now, this is not the new workflow engine in Acumatica. That's a whole separate thing. But in a sense, you can sort of define a workflow in your organization by using business events to go trigger tasks for people to do. And I'm going to use an example here where, let's say we've got an invoice, and actually we have a bunch of invoices, and maybe we want to detect on a schedule, maybe once a day at night, have a business event run and look for any invoices that are overdue, that still have a balance. And maybe we want to assign a task to a salesperson. And I think this works well because a salesperson is usually very oriented by their tasks. They're using tasks to schedule follow-up phone calls, etc. And why don't we drop a task right in their task area that they're used to using whenever there's an overdue invoice. Sure, accounting could call and try to get the customer to pay, but the salesperson has a better relationship. So let's assign the task to the salesperson. Now you're going to see as I go through this example, it's not complete. There's a little hiccup I found at the end, but I think you'll get the idea, and I'll give you a link at the end to a community post where hopefully we'll be able to figure out the last missing piece. Alright, so the goal using this new feature is to have an invoice and to have the business event automatically attach up here a task that you would see in the activities area on the invoice, and have it tell the salesperson to make an overdue invoice call. Alright, so that's our finished product. Now let's go ahead and go create a new business event to do that. We'll call this overdue invoice. And if I go to the screen, I want to do this on the invoices and memos screen. Now note you've got two options. One is the generic inquiry that you first go to when you go here. You first get taken to a generic inquiry, which is this 3010 PL. When I drill into an invoice, I see the actual data entry screen, which is the 301000. So you see both listed. There's the 3010 PL and there's the 301000. I want to use the 3010 PL, and the reason is if I do the 31000, you'll see that my only option here is to trigger by record change. So that would be a change that I make to an invoice, and as soon as I press the save button, it triggers the business event to fire. But in my scenario, I want it to fire like at night once a day, and this invoice might not become overdue until a month from now. So I'm not going to make any change to the invoice. It's just going to get picked up on a schedule. So I actually want to use this screen, and you can see now I have two more options. I have record change, I have schedule and action. I didn't have those before. Now in the real world, I would want to trigger by schedule, but that's kind of hard to demo because we have to sit and wait for the schedule to fire. So we'll just use trigger by record change. Just note you'd want to do it on a schedule for this example in the real world. And to keep things simple, I'm just going to say if the balance is is greater than 0. Alright, so I got a business event. It's going to get triggered if there's a record where the new value is greater than 0. Now I'd also want to add a condition in the real world with the due date, things like that. But the main point I want to illustrate here is on the subscribers. Here's the new feature in 2021 R2. It's called Task. Now actually in the release notes, it's called CRM Task. If I pop over here real quick to the release notes for 2021 R2, you can see it's called CRM Task. And in the first build that I was on, it was called CRM Task, but I'm on a more recent version, not the first build anymore, and it is now called task. Now I say all that because I actually like that better. I'm glad they renamed it, because it's not really just for CRM. We can attach this anywhere in Acumatica, like I'm doing here in invoice in the receivables area, not CRM, and we can still do this. So I like the rename there. So we're going to do task. We click this, and you'll see it pops open this new screen called task templates. And this is where we're going to define the template for the task that we want Acumatica to create. So we're going to call this overdue invoice. And let's see, I'm going to come down here, and let's say I want it to say that invoice number. Now here's where we can insert, this has been out for a while. We can insert some dynamic information. You can see it puts it in double parentheses. Invoice number, whatever it is overdue. And then we'll say, please call the customer. And then maybe I also want this to be a hyperlink so it can be clicked on. So I would come in here and say I want a link. And then I can go find the, in this case I want to do the data entry screen, so this one. It puts in my hyperlink, but I want a little bit more. So normally on the data entry screen it ends here, but I want to put this extra information, sorry about that. I want to put in this extra information at the end of it so it drills into a specific invoice. So let's do that. Now this is a little clunky, but I'm going to flip over to HTML, and you can see in here this is actually the HTML code for a link, and it's going up to the screen ID right now. We want to put in this extra information, doc type and ref number. So let's flip back here and let's go find out what those, I guess I already have ref number, so we just want doc type. Flip back to HTML, so we know this is doc type. We'll put that there, and we already have ref number. Where is it? Ref number. Looks like I wiped it out, so let's come back here. Do that again. Ref number, put that there, and then it looks like it replaced that my text that I had originally, so I'm going to say invoice number, the ref number. Flip back to visual and delete that. Alright, so now we've got a link that will take us directly to the invoice number. Now you're going to see in a moment, I actually don't like this for tasks, and you'll see why. I do like this for emails though. So you can use the same technique if you were to go back here, and if you were to do an email notification, you'd want to put that, use this technique to make the hyperlink clickable in the body of the email. Now for tasks, we also have some additional settings that we can set here. I'm not going to set anything, I'll just take the defaults. You know, like you could come in and have a priority, and you could even do a formula based on some of the values. So that's one thing you could do. I'm not going to go into any of the others, but just wanted to point out that tab. And back on this link here, what I like with the tasks is to use this link to entity field. Now if you go in here, it shows you every field that's available. It's like, well, which one am I supposed to use? Do I use the ref number? What identifies an invoice to Acumatica? And what it wants is it wants a note ID. A note ID is a unique identifier on a record in Acumatica. So in this case, I'm attaching the task to an invoice, so I want the note ID on the invoice. And let's pop into, this is the generic inquiry, that 3010 PL generic inquiry. And you can see here, I just added a field called note ID, gave it a caption, and that's why it's available. So you would have to add that. It's not available in the default generic inquiry. Okay, so now we've got a task template that's set up. Let's go ahead and save that. And you can see it also gives you a link back to the business events that reference this task template, because there might be multiple. In this case, I've only got one. And now I come back, I refresh here, and I can also see on the subscribers, there's the task template that I just created. So now let's go ahead and go over and create a new invoice. I'm going to use this customer, and I'll just make it a simple $60 invoice. Now again, I'm only doing this for testing purposes. I'm triggering this immediately. I think normally in this scenario you'd want to trigger it on a schedule, which is why I set it up on the generic inquiry, to at least take a step in that direction. And it will take a little bit for that business event to run, but you'll see I just refreshed here, and we can now see that there's an activity attached to this invoice. I could also see it on my regular task screen. So if I refresh this, there's the task that just got created up here. This was a previous one I was testing with. And then this is where, if you're looking at my task, this is where the salesperson could be looking at their specific task. They might drill into this from a dashboard, but it's just a regular task that they're used to working with. And typically they're used to creating these tasks manually, but we just had one created automatically off the business event. And if we open it up, you can see here that down here is the text, and I'll show you why I didn't like that link idea. I wanted to do it anyways, but I don't like it because I have to click it once and click it twice to go to the link. Well, I like saving clicks, so that's why we use this related entity area. So this up here, this link to entity, that's what populated this related entity field. And I like this because instead of 2 clicks, it's just 1 click. I can click right in here and I can see the invoice. Now we could have made this smarter. I think it probably would have been better to actually dynamically populate the customer's phone number from the billing contact, for example. So we could have added that information into the generic inquiry and made that available, so that maybe on the customer we pull up the billing tab and we grab the phone number directly here. That probably would have been useful information to have, but I think you can use your generic inquiry skills to do that. You can use the hyperlink here if you even wanted to make it a clickable phone number to call through Teams or something like that. But main point is that we can actually have a business event create this dynamically. I think it's a really cool feature, and I think there's a lot of uses for it. Now for the part that I was not able to get to work. You'll notice here that the owner is Maxwell Baker. Now the scenario I wanted to do, and I spent probably a good 45 minutes trying to do it, eventually I gave up, just thought I'd record the video without it. The scenario I wanted to do is I wanted to go to the customer, look up the default salesperson, which is Jay Parker in this case, and have Jay Parker be the owner. Now that's a critical piece of this, right? I don't want to assign the task to myself. I want it to get assigned to the salesperson for the customer. And the reason I was thinking to do it this way, instead of doing, let's say, the default salesperson on the invoice, is that, maybe by the time the invoice becomes overdue, there might be a new salesperson assigned to that account. So I want to pick it up off the customer and not off the invoice. Now I actually tried both ways. I even tried making it really simple and using the owner field on the invoice. I couldn't get any of them to work for some reason, not sure why. But the way that I believe it should work is this owner field right here. You can see you can populate this either hard-coded with owners. Now if I hard-coded Jay Parker, I was able to get that to work. But that's obviously not going to work because I've got multiple salespeople. So it was these fields I was trying to get to work, and it was actually the employee that I needed. So I did go in and I added to this generic inquiry, I added a join. I'll just show you that. So I joined over to Cuss Salespeople, and I did it on customer ID, the default location, and I made sure that the default checkbox was checked. That way I'm making sure I only get one salesperson in case there's multiple salespeople listed in this grid here. I'm just pulling the default, and then I go join over from there to the employee record based on the salesperson ID. And typically, when you're dealing with owner stuff, it needs to be an employee. And there is a link if we pull up the employee screen. You'll see there is a link on the employee. Actually, let's just pull up Jay Parker. You'll see right here, there is a link to salesperson. So that's how I'm doing this join from customer salesperson to employee. Now I even tried further. I went from employee to users. So there's also a link to the employee login right here. So I did that link as well. So I tried fields from the employee, from users, and I couldn't get any of them to work. No matter what I did on the task when it got created, it got assigned to Maxwell Baker, which is the admin user. So can't finish off that last part, but I did create a discussion question out here in the Acumatica community forums. I'll put a link to this in the YouTube video, and you can come back and check this to see if we're able to figure out that last piece of it in assigning the owner. But bottom line, I think it's really cool that you can attach records anywhere in Acumatica now automatically with a business event. They'll get attached, they'll also land on a person's task list. It'll give them something to do, and I think it's a nice, cool way to build light workflow into your Acumatica environment.